All right, folks, buckle up. Welcome back to Sovereign Radio. Now, indulge me with the introduction of my next guest because he's not afraid to tell the truth, even if it's going to make you feel a little bit uncomfortable. Sacha Stone is a cultural critic, a geopolitical provocateur, a writer, a producer, an entrepreneur, and the creator of the Arise Tour, a tour in which I traveled with Sacha. He created the tour with Robert David Steele. Rest in peace, Robert. And I traveled and spoke with the Arise Tour in 2021 with Sacha, Scott McKay, Sheriff Mack, Lee Dundas, Dr. Sandra from EE System, and a whole lot more. Sacha had the vision of what a real patriot tour was about: faith, family, and freedom. Now, the Arise Tour was a seminal road trip for patriots and truthers fighting the globalist sham known as the pandemic and their deadly jabs. Sacha crushed Anthony Fauci in the criminal globalist agenda on the Arise Tour, while I declared we are the mainstream media now. Sacha and Clay Clark are the only guys I know that can pull off a tour that have the chops, the savvy, and the connections to pull off such a massive live tour production. For years, Sacha's had a front row seat on how narratives are shaped, how influence really works, and how politics, entertainment, and ideology collide behind the scenes, whether you agree with Sacha or not. And that's the kind of point of view here we need, is a voice that challenges groupthink, questions sacred cows, and brings sharp insights into conversations that most people are too cautious to have out loud. Sacha holds the Sovereign Radio record for the most FCC required expletive bleeps. Sacha dropped 8 F-bombs, 3 shits, and 1 son of a bitch in 1 hour. And while me and my producer didn't give a shit, in broadcast media on talk radio, AM and FM radio stations, F-bombs are a bozo no-no. So we had to expletive bleep Sacha 8 times. He holds the record. I'm thrilled to welcome to the show a fearless thinker, a truth seeker, and likely the most articulate son of a bitch I know, my one and only friend, Sacha Stone. Sacha, how are you?
I genuinely thought you were going to say the sexiest guy I know. Whatever. I'll go with that, Scotty. That was fantastic. And I was just about to start by going, fig, 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 fig 9 times. So I've said fig 9 times. I think you'll allow that.
I'll leave the sexy part to Scott McKay because he thinks you're sexy.
Good to see you. You're looking very well. And
Thank
I'm
you, sir.
very pleased to be speaking in front of your enlightened audience again.
Yeah, it's great to see you. You know, it's been a long time. It's been a minute, as they say. I have it back to 2024, the summer of 2024 in Las Vegas on the Arise Tours, the last time I interviewed you on Sovereign Radio. So it's long overdue. As I said in my introduction, whether people agree with Sacha Stone or not, and I generally tend to agree, you just are going to tell it like it is, and that's why I love talking to you. I'm not going to get into any in-depth. I want to throw a lot of issues at you, get your thoughts on a lot of things. So let me start with Trump's speech at Davos. What's your takeaway in terms of his tone and the substance of his messaging?
I mean, I am one of those, along with my beloved brother, Scott McKay, who has thoroughly enjoyed Trump trolling the international geopolitical domain. So he's a past master at that. He's been doing it on his home turf consistently. He's now strutting the world stage, and he's trolling the world stage as the archetypal disruptor, which is clearly what the man is destined to be and was fated to be in this age. I think he's doing a spectacular job. His speech, from what I saw of it, and I confess I didn't watch the whole thing. I watched the front end of it, and then I watched sound bites from other world leaders after the fact. But it was clear to me that he was, again, leveling the playing field. He was situating the United States center ground of the known universe. And honestly, he has every right to do that, as far as I'm concerned, when we consider that the last 4 years and prior to Trump's first incumbency with generations of political leaders, and of course I'm referring here to the Obamas, the Clintons, the Bushes, and so on. Arguably one could go back and stop at Ronald Reagan, but that coterie of presidents since Reagan up until Trump's first incumbency was part of a globalist conspiracy to auto-destruct Middle America, take down everything that is substantial about who and what America is, and resurrecting America from the dead. Obviously, first term Trump did what he could. We saw what the response was to that. We understand about the now erstwhile weight and might of the satanic globalist engine, because the way it came back with the Biden administration and this terrifying kind of woke zombie rollout on the east and the west coast of America, which threatened at one point to engulf the whole of America into a dystopian collapse. Who else but Donald Trump could have come in and resurrected the situation? So waging tariff wars and using the tariff essentially as the core leverage in order to then position himself on the world stage with a full spectrum dominance of the geopolitical arena, which is exactly what he did in Davos. But he didn't do it in the way that the satanic globalist agenda were planning full spectrum dominance. They were planning it as a war theater. And Trump is dismantling the capacity for a globalist war theater. So he's promulgating and promoting full spectrum dominance, but it's to do with tact, his form of diplomacy and tact, which is playground bully tactics, which works a treat with morons in suits. I'm delighted. I'm absolutely delighted with his speech at Davos.
Well, that's a great bird's eye view, 10,000 feet. I think you said it very well. I'm going to throw 3 specific issues he covered at you just to get your thoughts. He called their Green New Deal a scam. He called it out for what it is. He said the windmills are just taking up landscape. They're killing birds. They're useless. They don't generate enough power. And the Green New Deal and your green energy is a scam, and it's dead, and it's not going anywhere. Agree?
Yes. Again, 17 odd years ago, I was Director General in the intergovernmental sector at the United Nations. I was the key man in renewable energy and in that whole domain. So I've held a significant office on the multilateral playing field many, many years ago in that domain. At that time, in 2009, 2010, I was calling out that very situation. I was calling out the orchestration, as was Dr. David Martin, who was working closely with me at that time. We were calling that out. We were calling out the peak oil nonsense. We were calling out the Gulf of Mexico oil spill Exxon scam. We were calling out the Fukushima, all of these controlled operations, which were installing a scarcity economics modality into the mindset of humanity. And as all of that was tethered to the way that the crowns of Europe, directly connected to that satanic globalist engine, have been using a fuel and energy and the misrepresentation of the truth of that, of what is green power. So for Trump now to be calling it out in Greenland is entirely appropriate. There's so many things come up in my mind when you talk about Greenland. Number one, it's not as big a piece of land as people think it is. People are referring to the Mercator map when they see Greenland. It looks like a subcontinent. It's not. If you actually see the real size of it, you pull it down to the equator, you'll see it's the size of Angola or one of the countries in Africa. So Greenland is not this huge tract of land, but it is a significant one. The fact of the matter is the Danish crown, which is nested in with the British crown and with the Bank of International Settlements, the IMF and the World Bank, and all all of those orchestrations, which are connected again to the Vatican complex and the Vatican Bank. And that's really a situation. And then you get into the toxic element of the CIA and Mossad and all the rest of it, and how the Babylonian cult to the Babylonian priesthood in that transnational basement have been orchestrating Greenland, for instance. That's just been part of the pawn in their game. And I think that Trump choosing something, a pawn like Greenland is an incredibly smart move, because it's one that he knows he can bring into play on that chess board. But Greenland is not the thing. It's going to now springboard from Greenland into multiplicity of other geolocations around the world. And Trump is going to be slowly unveiling and revealing that, again, to use for the fifth time the word satanic globalist agenda will be fully revealed. I believe by the end of this year, certainly into next year, it'll all be on the table. The point at which it collapses, fully collapses, is still remains to be seen. But personally, I understand what's going on with Greenland on the checkerboard, and I think it's a very smart play.
Yeah, we'll come back. I'm going to ask you about Greenland in particular. But, I forgot about your stint with the UN, whereas you got inside the globalist cabal, the deep state, the establishment. You got inside working for the UN. You saw it from within, the same way I saw mainstream media working inside in the trenches. I got to ask you, while we're talking about your stint with the UN, and then we'll get back to the subject at hand. What was your biggest takeaway from working inside the United Nations and having a position of influence where you can effectuate their decisions?
I came out publicly last year. I say publicly. I spoke in public for the first time only last summer with Dr. David Martin. He joined me on stage in Utah for a couple of hours, and we spoke to a live audience. And for the first time in all these years, he and I spoke about the Exemplar Zero initiative, spoke about the agenda that he and I were trying to foment to overthrow the petro dollar hegemony and bring in a quantum energy revolution at that time using the Gulf states. So I need a couple of hours to go into that story, but put it this way, I was very instrumental in trying to unearth this green scam that long ago, because I knew all about it. There's so many different elements to that story. Scotty, it's hard for me to start on one thread and not end up just blabbering.
Sure, understood.
But I can tell you that I also learned that the Clinton Global Initiative, the CGI, which at that time had preeminence on the geopolitical landscape, it was seminal. It was rather like a mobile Davos. And the Clinton Global Initiative at that time was systemically buying out the basement of the United Nations using Chinese communist billionaire money. And by that, I mean, that was really the invasion of the United States by China through subterfuge. And the Clinton Global Initiative was the medium. And I could see that taking place in the UN. How? By them financing and buying out the IGOs and the NGOs, the non-governmental organizations and the intergovernmental organizations that constitute the body politic of the UN were being bought out, meaning to say financed and compromised by Chinese money coming in through the Clinton Global Initiative. Very serious play. So that's the stuff I was also whistleblowing on. I never took a salary from the UN. I always refused a salary and an office, but I accepted the position of Director General. And I was involved in the Millennium Development Goals script, the nonsense. And one of the contributors to that was Dr. Jeffrey Sachs, a very brilliant economist who's now got preeminence, also one of the leading pundits in the world speaking to globalism. He despises Trump from what I can see. He's got that bit wrong. But good people like Dr. Jeffrey Sachs were always co-opted into the United Nations, and their academic credentials used, their acumen used to couch the scripts. But the scripts were always being orchestrated toward scarcity economics and the collapse of sovereign nations into a globalist hegemony, which is what the United Nations apparatus is designed to do. The fact that Donald Trump just withdrew this week, I believe, and Bobby Kennedy, from the WHO, is very, very good news indeed.
Quick note, I just got this. You'll be interested because two things I left out of your introduction. You're passed as a member of the UN, as a director general, and your rock star days. But I want to give a shout out to Scott Marr from The Doors. He's passed away. I didn't know if you knew that, but
yes, I did. Thank you.
It was a very influential band in the 60s and 70s. When I was in high school, The Doors was all that. So anyhow, let's move on from the Green New Deal. Trump called it a scam. He told the world, Sacha, that the party's over grifting and grafting from the USA, whether it's the money coming from USAID or the money from NGOs, the money from taxpayers. It's all taxpayer money, we know, but he absolutely declared the party's over. There's no more grifting and grafting from the USA. What say you about that?
I couldn't be happier to hear that. I'm one of those pundits who's been saying this for many years, that it is the good taxpayers of Middle America, which is the farmers, the common folk of Middle America, who the veterans, the good Christian middle American, who have been the victims of the globalist agenda, because they are the font. Their taxes have been the font, the wellspring that has been leached out of the American economy in order to foster and foment that globalist agenda through the back door. What an abomination that was. So in simple terms, Trump came in to curtail that game and restore Middle America to where it belongs. And that's happening.
You know, you weren't American born, but you really got inside Middle America when you traveled the country. You stayed in people's homes. People who are just coming to events, the average flyover country in rural parts of America. You really got an insight to Middle America. So when you talk about Middle America, it's not a concept to you. You actually lived and breathed it. But I just wanted to point that out to the audience. Probably the best thing I heard Trump say, besides the party's over, you're not getting our money anymore, NATO, all these people, they're going to have to stand on their own. The U.S. isn't supporting all that. Trump said globalism is dead. And that to me was music to my ears. Globalism is dead, and no more, no mas, finito. What do you think about that? How far along is he in that track, Sacha?
Well, like I just said, Scotty, if Middle America tax dollars was the font and the wellspring of the globalist agenda, and that well has dried up, of course, globalism is dead and over and buried. We're going to see repercussions. We're going to see all sorts of a frenzy out there of alliances taking place as they try to prop up their demonic game. Look at Macron wearing his shades. I wonder why he was wearing sunglasses. I wonder why. I have a very clear idea why, incidentally, but that was uniquely creepy. And the fact that Donald Trump then called that out in his speech, I thought was fantastic. That's what I'm talking about, trolling. But you know, Macron, a classic turd dressed up as a sock puppet, dressed up as a frontline political leader, is an orchestrated Vatican proxy puppet doing what he's bid to do. And he's part of a satanic and Luciferian Babylonian helter-skelter theater of iconography, meaning to say him and his husband, his wife, Brigitte Macron, is a classic example. So once that particular Luciferic and Babylonian helter-skelter of inverted sex comes to light, which it will do, it's just the start of that particular show, Scotty. This helter-skelter and flipping the hemispheres, putting men masquerading as women and women masquerading as men, and learning about the pantheon of icons and archetypes in the last century on the world stage, and who was actually a male, who was actually a female. That's the stuff that Revelation, by God's grace, is going to be shredding the mask of. And we're going to see the truth of history being revealed, going back to Queen Victoria being sired by the Rothschild at that time. So really the interposition of the red shield or the red child connected to the, again, satanic, to use for the eighth time, satanic interventionism that came into the political arena. But by politics, we're talking, the College of Cardinals in the Vatican, That's where politics emerges from. The Privy Council around the Crown of England, that's politics. That's where politics emerges from. The Fabian agenda, the Oxbridge set, these are where and how the politics emerged through think tanks in the Vatican basement and in the Crown basement. And then the notion of bringing in party politics and two sides, fighting at each other, red and a blue, a left and a, conservative and a Democrat. All of that nonsense, that's helter-skelter. That's a controlled objective of installing party politics and so-called democracy into the mainframe. That emerged through the Vatican basement. The Vatican and the Crown are inseparable in that sense. I'm talking about the Crown of England, but of course you fold into that the crowns of Belgium, Denmark, Norway, Holland, and so on, because that is the crown, Cronus. But I'm not sure that the mainstream are yet able to grapple with this language, the Babylonian priesthood, helter-skelter in the basement language. That's where my form of truth telling has always held the line. I will not stand my talking down. I won't dilute my language in order to suit sensibilities or sensitivities, because pure truth is pure truth is pure truth. And ultimately, it's the only thing that will prevail. So you're right, and thank you for acknowledging that I took Anthony Fauci to task in January of 2021 by asking Bobby Kennedy and Dave Martin and Rocco Galati to put Fauci on trial, the mock trial, which we did with the Focus on Fauci event. That was a wet dream of mine that lasted 3 hours, and Bobby Kennedy and the crew came in to do that. And we literally held Fauci to account on a mock trial, and everything we did in that Focus on Fauci event, which of course was expunged from the web within days of being put out there and went viral, that ended up being the bedrock of now the revelation of what's behind the World Health Organization, the Bill Gates Foundation, and indeed the CDC, AMA, and FDA. So all of those Saturnian engines in the United States administration and governance are going to be revealed. They're going to be outlawed. And Trump, I believe, in the next year or two, is going to be the one literally cutting the head off the snake, but by amputating his own arms and legs. Because that apparatus is Washington District of Columbia.
So Trump and his team that traveled with him, including Scott Bessent, the U.S. Secretary of Treasury, and his business advisor who spoke, Howard, I can't remember Howard's last name, but all three of them talked about globalism being dead. And that's really a juxtaposition to the sovereignty that we all toured about. The Urias tour was all about sovereignty, right? It was about becoming sovereign nations, sovereign individuals again. So to hear globalism is dead is really above and beyond the attack on Fauci. And because we were in the midst of the pandemic and we were watching our friends and family get jabbed while we were on tour. I remember at the end of every day, Sacha, on tour, I'd call home and make sure nobody I knew got jabbed that day, because people were out buying into the mainstream media fear that if you didn't get the jab, you were going to get deathly ill from COVID and possibly die. And old people were being put in nursing homes, and children were getting jabs. And it's just a complete shit show. And you and I were out there plugging away for sovereignty. Big picture, globalism is dead is music to our ears, because it's all about the sovereignty that we seek. You haven't wavered. I know you since 2020. The first time you were on Sovereign Radio was the fall of 2020. I started the show in April. You came on in the fall. We had some of these conversations about sovereignty and globalism. You haven't wavered. You have stayed the course. You've not stopped. And God bless you. You're still out there throwing punches. You get in the ring you throw punches, you left jab, you right hook, and you continue to fight 15 rounds in the ring, Sacha. And it's
thank you, Scotty. And I have to say, I do remember very clearly that interview, because I was at my villa in Bali, and I remember I was pacing. I think it was a 3-hour interview. It was a really long one that you did. But
yes,
remember, I was pacing the whole time. I was actually on my feet on the phone doing that interview with you. And I remember that you had told me at the front end of it. This is historic, Sacha, because you are allowed to say whatever it is that you want to say. No holds barred. And that to me was, on mainstream. And that was an extraordinary offering. And I remember going into the story of the Clintons with you and talking about the satanic agendas there, what lay beneath. And we were able to bring all of that stuff to light. And I genuinely felt at the time, Scotty, and I've looked back over 6 years, and I still regard that as being a seminal interview. I never heard it back, incidentally, myself, but at some point I'd love to get hold of the tape, because I think history and time certainly will reflect that what you and I were doing in that seminal interview was literally unleashing alpha and omega for the truth and disclosure to really erupt out of the basement. And subsequent to that interview, as happenstance would have it, that's exactly what you and I have been witnessing in our lives with the cohort of brilliant influencers and activists and pundits that you and I deal with constantly over the years. That orchestration, that beautiful symphony of truth and disclosure is now morphing into revelation itself, and that's a powerful thing.
Yeah, as the Grateful Dead said, what a long, strange trip it's been. But here we are 6 years later. We're still able to speak through the mainstream media because I'm still on broadcast radio. And I love being able to walk that road on mainstream media, talking to the normies, the Fox News people that are hearing some of these things for the first time. And as well, we put this to podcast online, and that's where your audience and my audiences are familiar with our work, and they understand what we're talking about. They've been listening to it since 2020 on this show and have heard you interviewed many times. And it's really kind of profound that we're talking about some of the same things. The concepts haven't gone away. The big picture of what we've been fighting for is still fundamentally on the table, and we're now seeing the fruits of our labor. I believe we're really seeing some of the fruits of our labor, toiling on the road and dragging across country and sparring with Robert, God bless his soul, and all the shit we went through. It was all good. I look back on that as all good, that experience. But let's talk about Venezuela. I've been wanting to get your thoughts on Venezuela and Maduro without prompting you in any direction. Give me your thoughts. Lay it on me.
Again, a classic genius Trump move, conducted with such a precision and such political and military and intelligence acuity. It was a devastating blow, again, to the globalist agenda. It came out of left field, a little bit of murmurings in the weeks prior. Will he, won't he? No one quite knew. It was enough to out people in the cloisters to see what murmurings people would be making about the idea of an extraction or of an invasion, should I say, of Venezuela. So whilst people were expecting an invasion, it was in point of fact an extraction, and it was an extraction of the head of the snake. Not to kill it or to take the head off, but to own the asset of the head of the snake. So that brilliantly conceived and executed military plan worked to perfection. Now, was Maduro involved in that? Was that part of a conspiracy that he was privy to? Actually, that is quite possible. It could have been that he was privy to that extraction event and had agreed to it, and may indeed be looking at a short tenure in prison and then be released. And at least he didn't get shot and executed or thrown to the wolves in his own country, even worse. So how it plays forward, I don't know. Frankly, I don't really care too much. But I do think it was a brilliantly executed piece of political and military strategy. I think that what it's done is sent a very necessary and needful shot across the bow to all other countries. And of course, we're talking about Colombia. Of course, we're talking about the other Central and South American nations. Mexico is one of them, who know full well that you fuck with the United States now, They will come, they will cross borders, they will abrogate, derogate, defile, desecrate international compacts and treaties if necessary, because they are unilaterally now acting to protect and preserve their own auto-destruct within the globalist landscape. And that is entirely correct. That is what a good, godly leader does. You don't pay attention to international treaties and compacts or statutory law if it is, in fact, out of law, if it is out of resonance. And the point being that international compacts and international treaties in the main were constructed and engineered precisely in order to be a cloak of protection for the status quo to continue its globalist agenda. And that was a tiptoe tyranny, which was very clever and took place over many years. By many years, I'm referencing the Fabianist agenda, which is pre-World War, but I'm talking about principally the orchestration of the United Nations in the late 1940s. So by the 1960s, that was all locked and loaded. Venezuela was the first. Mexico almost certainly will be next, one imagines. And like I said, after the Greenland debacle settles, I think we're going to see a multiplicity of geolocations all around the world brought into the same deconstruction narrative that Trump is heading up. I just wonder how this is going to play out with the European and NATO forces trying now to consolidate their position, certainly in light of Davos. This Davos, it's going to be very, very interesting to see what alliances they try to prop up. But like I said, I don't really know or care about how these things play out. And I'll tell you why I sound dismissive. It's not because I'm disinterested in justice or in remedy. I'm very interested. It's just that I don't believe that any of these countries in Europe, the countries that we're dealing with, France, Germany, United Kingdom, Australia, Canada, the countries in the Commonwealth, and countries in the NATO alliance, all of those are so foundationally rotten to the core that it doesn't really matter how they choose to prop each other up in alliances now. It is not congruent with God's law, and so it'll fall over. It won't stand up to scrutiny. My reckoning is that Donald Trump and what he's doing is congruent with God's law, reconstituting a family, a community, gender specification. Boys are boys and girls are girls. That's just the way it is. Sorry, guys. And families, communities, the culture of Middle America, the restoration of Christian values in a Christian country. That we're seeing now play forward in Italy. We're seeing that play forward to some extent even in Germany. We're seeing the police ordering women wearing burqas in supermarkets to take the veil off. This, to my mind, is entirely appropriate. Entirely appropriate. If we went in bikinis into Jeddah or into the Qatar, people would be arrested and have their heads taken off. So it is entirely appropriate, as far as I'm concerned, what I'm seeing happen. And Venezuela was very totemistic, in my view, of the new play forward in military and political strategy. It'll be no nonsense, no bullshit. Go in, take care of the problem, and mitigate as much as possible so that there are next to zero casualties. Game over, done. That saved us billions of dollars of propaganda and nonsense and genuflecting and gesturing on the world stage. It was over within minutes. I can't hear you, Scotty.
First of all, I apologize for the distraction. I had to plug my computer into a power source. I was about to fade out and die on you. So I am repositioned. And I want to talk about the aspect of Venezuela that is really the golden nugget to me. Maduro holds the key to the election fraud in 2020. Dominion and Smartmatic, all these companies came out of Venezuela. My good friend Tina Peters remains in jail.
Our very good friend Tina.
Yes, I should say our friend. And it all ties together. The election fraud, that Maduro holds the key. I hear he's singing like a bird already. He's naming names and talking the talk, and he holds the key to a lot of that proof of election fraud that came out of Venezuela and Italy and other parts of Europe. And it was a big blow to, as you said, the globalist communist regime, because taking down Maduro was not about taking down the sock puppet communist. It was about taking down communism and putting a big dagger into that communist. You know, a lot of similarities between Venezuela and Greenland. You started to talk about Greenland. Talk to us about, I know you're plugged into this, the energy and the resources that live on the ice. Trump called it a big chunk of ice. He said, all I want is I've never asked for anything. Now I'm just asking for a big chunk of ice, he said to
Davos. So let me speak to this, and I'm actually going to take you on a little journey whilst I do it, because I can illustrate a point here in my office in Mexico whilst I'm illustrating the point. So as far as, oh dear, am I still on? I'm on.
Yeah, you're on.
Okay, good. Sorry, I saw the screen go black. So I just wanted to retrieve from downstairs something given to me by the indigenous, let's just put it, the hereditary indigenous leader of Greenland. That's a ruby, a very large ruby, as you can see. And that was given to me as a gift 5 years ago by the hereditary leader, elder of Greenland. And at that time, I was asked to see if we could help collateralize the minerals of the country. Because if we could have done the spectral analysis at that time and collateralized Greenland, that could have been the mainstay of a whole new economy. Vast, epochal wealth under the ice in Greenland. So in short thrift, I know I hold a very valuable ruby in my hands as a gift from the hereditary elder leader of Greenland, who is in charge of all of the indigenous assets, which includes all the value underground. So for me, and there's another thing happening right now, and I'm not allowed to speak to it, but less than a week ago, I received the telephone call from a king. It's a very powerful king. I'm in fairly close touch with him in the last 2 years. I'll give a hint to my own audience. He made a surprise appearance on stage with me last year in California. Some of you may recall. I think it was in Sedona, forgive me, in Sedona. Yeah, he came on stage and joined me for an hour in the armchair when I was doing my private tour. So those of you who know who I'm talking about. And this king, he was in the United States at the time. So this king I spoke to a few days ago, and he tells me that their kingdom have the alliance with Greenland and with the natural resources. They hold the treaties of the natural resources. The reason I'm saying this in this interview with you is that I know a great deal about Greenland and about what lies beneath. And we're not just talking about minerals, we're talking about very arcane technologies as well, okay? But let's just speak here about the mineral value. Who owns what? That's all connected to ancient treaties. Denmark thinks they own something. They don't own it. Who owns Denmark? And so it goes on. The provenance and the true form of these Jesuitical treaties and covenants and compacts signed hundreds and hundreds of years ago. That's true form. All of that, by God's grace and by revelation, has got to be unlocked and disentangled in the coming days. That is where hereditary redemption is going to be emerging. Trump chose Greenland, I believe, because Greenland is a tremendous resource that in the near term can be leveraged in order to bring about revenue. But that's a topical subject. Greenland is also a very important example of how Trump can detonate the basement of all of these ancient Vatican contracts and crown contracts and treaties, which were, all of them abrogated, derogated, and desecrated over the last couple of hundred years. So restoring the provenance to the true indigenous First Nation peoples, I believe, is something we're going to see. And I think that Trump's return to geopolitical and socioeconomic sovereignty of America is the first big stand toward that. Then we're going to see a kind of dissolution of that apparatus as the world moves into a far more emancipated age of decentralized economics and unsequestered technologies, meaning anti-gravitational technologies, quantum, hyperloop, all of these kinds of technologies, which within 5 to 7 years are going to be absolutely extant on every high street. Not that the high street is going to be something you recognize in 7 years from now, because it will not. We're going to see VTOL, vertical takeoff and lift craft, personal, logistics, cargo, the whole lot. Asphalt on strips on a horizontal plane in a generation or two from now will be a thing of the past. We're moving off the horizontal plane of the earth into the vertical plane of the earth. And that, Scotty, is one step toward biological ascension and geological ascension. That's to do with the quality and the geometry of light that is changing in the solar system right now. That's a measurable phenomenon. We are literally changing from the inside out. We're moving into a higher harmonic, a higher dynamic of even physical and physiological expression. That's the stuff that human beings in the next few years are going to have to start wrapping their cultural heads around. The fact that we are involved not just in another play of geopolitics, of socioeconomics, we're in a play of biological ascension. That's the real message in the Christic faith that people are not paying attention to. We're not supposed to be fascinated by, Sacha Stone and Scotty Saks tours or Clay Clark tours. Beyond a certain point, we all need to elevate our minds beyond politics, beyond activism, beyond humanitarianism, and get into the spiritual upshift that is about to take place. And that's also connected to the military-industrial basement being unearthed, which is the technologies that have been sequestered are being released right now. The biological and biotech technologies are being released and coming to the fore as well. I could speak to that at great length because I'm very involved. But even that is just a stepping stone towards the spiritual and morphogenetic evolutionary upshift that's about to happen. Honestly, Scotty, I believe that your demographic, there's so many closet people in your network who would agree with me 1,000%. This is the new language of sovereignty, where we're not even looking at world leaders anymore and ancient kingships and ancient treaties and compacts. We're saying, hey, who am I in the here and now? Here's my crypto wallet. That's my value. I don't need to be governed by the IRS, and that's going to be dismantled, incidentally, by Trump imminently. We're about to move into a world beyond time, money, and fear, which is what I predicted in 2012. In the first big television interview that I did with the Belgian television, as those people in my audience will remember. It was a 2-hour special called Beyond Time, Money, and Fear. And every single thing I said then has pretty much come to pass. I'm out by about 2 years. I said the dissolution of government would take place within 10 years. Governments would not resemble what they did in the past for the last 100 years. That's more or less happening. But now we're going to see, by the end of Trump's tenure, we're going to see a complete deconstruction of the social contract that exists between government and the citizen. Citizens will no longer be citizens. They will be emancipated. They will be living very, very long lives within the next 5 to 7 years. That biotech will be released. I know, I'm involved. And people will be living for 200-300 years without blinking. That can happen today, literally today. We have the science today. They're growing teeth back now in your gums, and you can regrow all of your teeth. You can age reverse. We know you can take age reversal back by about 1/3 today. So if you're 75, you can move back to 49, 50 in terms of how you look. Moreover, you can be in optimized health. And that's not using med beds, incidentally. That's just using advanced biodynamic technology.
Well, you went way beyond, but thank you for some great insights. Would you hold up that mineral again? Little did I know that on Sovereign Radio, leave it to Sacha Stone, the only guy I know who can show us an asset, an in-ground asset from Greenland. Look at that. Sacha, that is one of many in-ground assets being used.
The big ring.
Yeah, a very valuable one. That asset, along with the many in-ground assets in Venezuela and Greenland around the world, are being used to value currency
Yes.
in the next iteration, as you say, decentralized.
Yes.
In the decentralization, these are the assets in ground that'll be used
Correct.
to value currency. Isn't it
And
true?
Scotty, can I just say, Scotty, I'll just insert this here because my audience knows this, because I speak to my own closed audience consistently on this, but I'm directly involved. In the last 12 months, I've been to something like 27 countries, and I can tell you that I've spent 4 times I've been to Africa, and on 3 occasions I've been in to meet the King of Kings. I've met with, I think, 17 or 18 of the paramount chiefs and kings of kings in Africa in the last 18 months alone. And I've spent months on the ground there. And I've been directly involved with ethical mining groups, spectral analysis groups in Germany and in the Middle East. And we're involved. I'm launching on the 20th of February at the Conscious Life Expo in Los Angeles. I'm launching and announcing and launching the New Earth Exchange. This is a historic exchange that we've spent years working on. And this piece is finally bringing an exchange to people of the world for tokenizing, using NFTs and tokens to be able to buy in to contain and own a piece of these infrastructural projects, whether it's building bridges or dams or hospitals or clinics, the right projects that are approved and are listed on our exchange, as well as our own New Earth sanctuary projects and micronation projects and energy technology and biotech projects. All of these are going to be listed on the New Earth Exchange. We have over $5 billion worth of government projects as well in Africa that have been approved with feasibilities that are going to be listed on our exchange. This is an exchange where people of the world, all around the world, can start to take back the containment and so-called ownership or custodianship or stewardship of planetary infrastructure and own a piece of the action from wherever they are. This is absolutely historic, but that's where it's going. And that's why things like understanding how to collateralize, tokenize the locked assets, leave them underground. You don't need to pull up the oil or the gas or the hydrogen or the minerals. You don't need to pull them up. You just need them locked in the soil and use them as a collateral. Get Bureau Veritas or one of the other accrediting agencies to sign the certifications. That is bankable paper. And you use that to launch your coin, and you create a prosperity coin for that kingdom, that trust land, that those First Nation peoples. That's what we've been doing with New Earth for the last couple of years, and it's about to kick off this spring.
Last note on these in-ground assets, particularly Venezuela and Greenland, because Trump has shown a direct interest in, I'll use the word, controlling those in-ground assets, to which I say, why not the good guys and Trump control them? If we don't control them, if Trump and the military white hats don't take control of these wonderful in-ground assets, the deep state globalist contingency will take control. They have had control. And how do those assets benefit the people of Venezuela and Greenland? They don't. Trump will set up sovereign wealth funds for these countries where the people of these countries will begin to benefit from the assets under the control of Donald Trump.
And they want it, and they want it, and they welcome it, and that's entirely correct. Venezuela has always been the bitch of the Vatican, be clear. Mexico, and I love this country, has also been an asset in that sense of the Vatican of Italy. Look at the study the symbology, study the flags of Mexico and of Italy, and then I'll start asking questions about the original Illuminati and fringe Illuminati families. Mexico is a centerpiece to the Vatican or the Vaticanus. But these things, again, will be born to the light through revelation and through the maneuvers of one Donald J. Trump in the days ahead.
Well, let's move on to another subject I wanted to talk to you about, the Islamic Caliphate push to bring Sharia law to the West. We're looking at this very closely, taking it rather seriously, because if you look at London, if you look at Paris, and you look at Dearborn, Michigan, 3 cities, different sizes, all that have an element of Sharia law now guiding those cities. Even Dearborn, Michigan has a component of Sharia law where there's no-go zones for white people and police, and the Muslim Caliphate is running it. My question to you, Sacha, is this Islamic Caliphate push to bring Sharia law to the West a matter of convergence of agenda with the deep state, or is it in coordination? So is it a convergence thing or a coordination thing? Are they just converging, the Muslim Caliphate and the deep state? Are their agendas aligning, or are they in a back room coordinating with the hookah smoke and the cigar smoke?
It's six of one and half a dozen of the other. My own story in diplomacy, citizen diplomacy, began in 1999 when I was seeking the approbation or blessing of the Pope of Islam. At that time, the Grand Mufti Muhammad Salah al-Tantawi al-Azhar, and then meeting with the Gaddafis and meeting with the Bin Ladens and all the others that I met with one way or the other over the years in all of the royal houses in the Middle East and in North Africa, and ending up in Indonesia through Abdurrahman Wahid Gusdur, the former Islamic cleric president of Indonesia, who brought me to Indonesia over 20 years ago. So that was all connected to my own understanding and my own diplomacy connected to Islam. Why? Because I knew 25 years ago that Islam was being fomented, or the Judeo-Christian mindset was being set against the Islamist and the Islamist against the Judeo-Christian, and that Huntingdonian clash of civilizations was the epicenter of the foment of a planetary dystopia. So I knew that was the essential piece. So the caliphates that you're talking about, the Mujahideen and the ISIS that sprang out of the loins of Satan, and the fundamentalist zealots in the Islamic world and North African world, financed, yes, by the rat lines and by the deep state, are no different to the fundamentalist zealots and evangelical nonsense that's been coming out of mid-Western Christianity for a long time as well, fomenting racial hatred and discord amongst the American people. So fundamentalist anything, zealous anything is unhealthy and is out of balance and coherence. So we've had the Vatican complex through the genuflecting of billions of Catholics kissing rosaries whilst priming their shotguns and shooting each other in the face. Over centuries, that's been going on. The Spanish armadas and all of that. I'm referring back to even how this country was formed back in the day by the Spaniards, and so it goes on. So the religious zealotry has always been, to answer your question, Scotty, the preserve of the cigar chomping Babylonian priesthood in the basement. And the cigar chomping, which used to take place almost expressly in the cloisters of the Vatican, and the Black Papacy, or the superior general of the Jesuitical enclaves in the Vatican, used to be ground zero, but that evolved into a planetary intelligence circuitry with Mossad, MI5, MI6, and CIA, but not just them. 190 plus other nations in the world that were all formatted and orchestrated. And in the middle of their military intelligence is also a cabal element that is highly compartmentalized from the intelligence. So you can sit down with the head of intelligence in a given country like Sudan or Ecuador or Mozambique, and I've done this on multiple occasions, and you're dealing with a good guy who doesn't know that within his own intelligence agency is a highly compartmentalized superior protocol that have the lines open to the CIA and to Mossad. So you've got compartmentalized echelon within these military industrial organs. And so most people, even in the United Nations, this is what I was saying many years ago, 95% plus of the people, possibly 98%, 99% of the people in the United Nations, 50,000 of them, are thoroughly good human beings who go to work every day and wonder why their agendas never reach goals, why their godly dreams of emancipating women or child mortality or permaculture never actually get into global policy, because there is always a technocratic sliver beneath the capstone of the pyramid in these organs that is designed to intercept and intercede and intervene and to cock block any possibility of policy change. So that happens in Washington. It's happened in England. The Queen of England was a thoroughly decent human being. The Secretary Generals of the United Nations invariably are decent enough technocrats. They are not the problem. It is always this Jesuitical, third-party, interventionist, satanic, luciferic echelon that is installed into the military complex, into the entertainment complex, into academia in Oxbridge and in Yale and Princeton and so on and so forth. And this is part of the confusion. And same thing with Masons. Why most Masons are thoroughly decent human beings. They all get a bad rep nowadays. But 98% of them are thoroughly decent human beings. They don't understand themselves about the hyper-compartmentalization within their own ranks. That is a satanic force. And so it goes on. You have to conduct hundreds and hundreds of hours of testimonies like I've done and like my team have done to the International Tribunal, hundreds of hours of testimony coming in from Freemasons, coming in from people locked in the Catholic Church, coming from people, veterans in the military, who were variously used in experiments and were privy to and saw the horrors in the basement. So we've learned firsthand a lot of it through the International Tribunal for Natural Justice. It's not reading conspiracy theories that I'm then repeating. So I'm just saying, Scotty, we're living in a complex dystopian model of informed reality. And real sovereignty requires us to step outside of that satanic theater and stop tap dancing on the checkerboard of the kingdom of the devil and enter into covenant with our own relationship with Christ, our own relationship with God. And in that sacred space, start to realign ourselves with pure truth and with right action. I'm not here to proselytize to your audience, but I just say that the answer to all of these questions comes back really to the degree to which I'm prepared to be propagandized into false light reality versus am I prepared to move into coherence with pure truth and right action and start to be the living testament, the living gospel, and the living witness in my life and do God's work every minute of every day.
Well, thank you for that. Final note on the Islamic Caliphate. I think you'd agree that Islam, Sharia law, the Muslim push to the West is a tool of the deep state to destabilize. It's another divide and conquer tool, destabilize. And I don't think Americans in the end will have a stomach for this crap. I think there's a lot of good Americans that'll stand up to it. It may even take, Sacha, in some instances, 48 mosques in 24 months were open in Scott McKay's neck of the woods in Dallas.
Terrifying.
It may take the military to come in and quietly shut them down. But in the end, my concern is simply singlefold. It is the birth rate of Muslims in the United States and the West. They're outnumbering us 4 and 5 kids to 1. They throw it in my face. I've had several Muslim friends go, "What's wrong with you American guys? We're having 5 kids to year 1. Do you know what's going to happen by 2050? What will happen by 2050 if this pace continues, Sacha?"
Well, Scotty, democracy, as we understand it, will not be part of the equation. So we don't need to concern ourselves. Again, we're just stuck in the mud, looking at our own feet and our own ingrown toenails. That is, we're not going to learn anything from that, frankly. We're just part of a circular conversation of a dystopian having tea party in a prison cell. I'm not participating in that conversation myself. I am deeply embedded in now building the new earth forward, forging new horizons, new micronations and sovereign enclaves like we've set up in Tennessee in the United States. I'm building the new earth forward, but building forward and incubating our own technologies, our own economy, our own social ecology. That is where the world is headed. The others who are going to be fighting at each other in inner cities and trying to vie for supremacy in a shithole, good luck. You're all going down the sewer. The whole goddamn lot of you, because your actions are godless. You're not standing in God's truth. You're not conducting God's grace. You're not part of the meek inheriting the earth if you're part of the dialectic. Step away from the dialectic. You're right to speak to these things. This imposition of mosques in Christian America is an abomination. Beyond a certain point, it's an absurdity. And I'm speaking as a Muslim scholar, somebody who studied it for years and has great sympathy and great love for the mystical traditions of that great faith. In the same way that I have the Zohar underneath my computer, right? Why? I'm supposed to be an anti-Semite, according to Wikipedia. I have Christian, an adulation and love for the Christian ethic more than any other. That I am not a man who is owned by zealotry or by political agendas dressed up as spirituality. I am a good human in God's grace, doing God's work, and my relationship with God is intact, I urge every human being to stop speculating on what it's going to be like in 5, 10, 15 years if we continue playing the same game. Obviously, if we continue playing the same game, we go to hell in a handbasket. But look out there. Is that what we're really seeing? No. I'm seeing the geometry of a whole new world. I'm seeing the meek inherit the earth in real time. I'm on airplanes every 2 weeks. I'm landing in different countries. I'm having conversations with every demographic you can imagine. And I'm seeing and hearing and feeling a new symphony emerging, Scotty. And it's good. It's all good.
That's a much better answer than the one I would get to most people about the birth rates in America with the Muslims. And it's a much bigger picture. And it's where we're going. And I'm going to end our conversation later on the spiritual war, if you will, the spiritual essence of where we're at and where we're going. So we'll come back to that thought, because what you're really saying is we all got to move beyond these esoteric ideas and the politics and the democracy versus a republic, and move to where we're really heading, which is, I think, a world in which we'll all come together and we'll all see the world as one. I know it seems very far away right now, but it really isn't all that far away, is it, Sacha? We're already there in many respects.
We're there. We already arrived on dry shore. You know, Scotty, honestly, if we really look at it, we want to understand the galactic archaeocosmological perspective, and one cannot poo-poo that. Even the Pentagon files is demonstrating the fact that human beings are the galactic hybrid. Everyone is having to wake up to the fact of UFOs and extraterrestrials and interdimensionals and all the rest of it. This is just part of the awakening. It's part of revelation. It's just put your big panties on and strip yourself naked, you know, in the mind, and just receive the revelation of that God's revelation. Receive it. It is multifarious. It is enchanting beyond imagining. But we must have the courage to stand naked in that sense and see the world through the eyes of a child. If we're constricted and intellectually locked into our conjectures and into our toxic notions of time and motion and fear and time as money and all of that, we are dead. We are part of the entropic decline. We will be bifurcated off and become space dust or rekindled into, you know, reincarnation fodder. Or we can participate in revelation, in the ascension, the biological and geological and astrophysical ascension of this entire plane of being, because of plane of existence, because that is actually what is happening. I mean, I'm sitting down with astrophysicists who are talking about the geometry of light changing, about the field signatures and the resonance of the entire Earth is at a crescendo never imagined before. What does that mean? How is that impacting us? The fact that the geometry of light is changing in the Milky Way with the impact of the photon band that's coming in, and we're all being enlightened from the inside out. So all of these old arcane notions of doctrine, of dogma, we have got to relinquish ourselves to a great extent from those strictures, or we will hurt in the days ahead. We are required, as I said again, I couldn't choose it better than by extracting it from the good book. We must begin to see the world through the eyes of a child.
Well, we could hold a whole series of shows on light energy and the effect it's going to have on the population.
Yes.
I want to talk to you about fraud. Americans are freaking out over the fraud in Minnesota, and I'm laughing. What did you think was happening with our tax dollars? Where did you think they were going? How did we get $37 trillion in debt as a nation? Sacha, you've seen fraud from within at the UN. You've seen fraud from abroad around the world. You've seen the globalist deep state fraud. You're not surprised about Minnesota. California will be on a scale 1,000 times Minnesota. New York, California, Illinois, Chicago. The scale of fraud.
Yes.
Is it fair to say?
Okay, Scotty, let's take it home. Let's take this home, because I've got 3 minutes. I've got to get ready for this other thing happening in 12 minutes. Let's take it home. The fraud that's being perpetrated against Homo sapiens sapien is the birth bond. You are collateralized at birth. The scam begins at birth. This goes back to the Vatican. It goes back to Doomsday. It goes back to the Caesars of Rome. It goes back to Babylon. So the fact of the matter is that the collateralization of false light economy in this world, which is to say scarcity economics, which is to say war economy, which is to say blood economy, is all predicated on the collateralization of human soul. The fabric of human soul is owned and indentured through a grotesque scam, which is the birth registration, death registration. Everything that is licensed or registered to the state, to the crown, is a collateral, is paper money that is used then as a collateral to enslave us into false light economics. So once we understand that our own signature, which is the granting of our own permission, is what does the devil's bidding, we will awaken from the dream, step back into true autonomy and sovereignty. And no Donald J. Trump and no Washington District of Columbia will have anything to say on the matter. In point of fact, I believe that Donald J. Trump and the true white hats understand fully that that is part of the reverse engineering of the war economy that they're involved in right now. It takes us back to full illumination. And I'm not saying that Donald Trump is aware of all of this degree of spiritualized esoterica, but his inertia, what motivates him as a foundationally good being, good human, is to deconstruct the satanic agenda. And that is what is taking place. And that is good news for modern man.
I'm glad you brought up it begins at birth with our birth certificate, because they buy and sell our birth certificates from the day we're born. They're locked together and they're packaged up just like stocks and bonds and bought and sold, aren't they? So let's close, since you got to run, on a spirituality note, if you will. I don't know what else to call it for my mainstream media audience. Explain the rise in the level of consciousness of the spirituality of Earth. We've touched on this. You've addressed it in this interview, this discussion. But let's close on that. Where are we going? How do you see our consciousness and our spiritual beings rising to a level where we can all come together as one?
I'll try to composite this in 2 minutes. 26,000 years ago, fall of Atlantis. 13,000 years ago was the real fall. So it was a 13,000 year decline into a collapse. The collapse occurred 13,000 years ago. That was the time of Noah and the ark, the great deluge. It has been about 13,000 years through the semi-arc of the grand precession of the equinox that we have been in what you would call a galactic sleep. We have now broken through the photon band, which is the ecliptic of the galaxy, and we are, after 13,000 years, breaking through the ecliptic into the Aquarian age, which is to say the emergence of God's grace, of revelation of the photonic light, vibral light, the true light of eternity. And we're moving now into a galactic day arc of 13,000 years. But in point of fact, we've moved beyond 1260 linear time cycles altogether. We are moving now, shifting into an epochal dimensional upshift, where you take that grand precession of the equinox model and you flip it on its side, and you see a round ring that is actually a spiral. We're now moving into the vertical at that macro level, into a assured ascension spiral. That means that everything that we think we know is real is not. It's part of a 2, 3, or 4% compression of false light reality. All of the incarnations you and I have had, and our friends and families and audiences looking in, have been part of this 26,000 year false light cycle. Certainly the last 13,000 year, a galactic sleep cycle. We are now about to break out of that altogether, mind, body, and soul and spirit. Those humans who have not learned temperance through multiple incarnations are moving into a bifurcation event, which ultimately will see them brought back into space dust, annihilation at the level of the fabric of soul. There's no great tragedy there. That's all based on choices. The agenda of COVID, the genetic interventionism of agrochemicals and pharmaceuticals, all of that stuff is part of the Babylonian cacophony designed to install death and entropy into the human family and hold us back from that natural, innate ascension event. It has not worked. It failed. By the end of December 2020, it had already failed. By the 21st of December 2020, that agenda had failed. That is well known. It's why we went through a weird, spooky Joe Biden woke kind of time, because that was the zombie apocalypse playing out. Weirdness, boys become girls, helter skelter. We're now restoring coherence to that woke, liberal, weird, topsy-turvy nonsense. We're going to go back into full spectrum dominance and reclamation and restoration of some kind of synchronous order. That's going to play a role for the next few short years. We're then moving into convention with the galactic intelligences. That is all going to be crystal clear within the next 2 to 3 years. The extraterrestrial and galactic genome connection to the human genome. And none of this takes away from the message of Jesus. None of this takes away from the true saints and avatars and their mystical traditions, incidentally. I am thinking about writing a book next year to put this all into one track because I understand the mathematics of it at my ripe age. The point is we're on the tip of an ascension spiral. All rules are off. It now comes down to you and me in the here and now, and the degree to which we can reckon with and recognize our innate, immanent divinity, each of us, in our caravan, in our little trailer home, in our mansion, in our yacht on the Pacific. It doesn't matter who you are, where you come from. Each of us is having the reckoning in our lives. And each of us must now look to our relationship directly with the divine, absent any third-party intervention. And that means dogmatic Christianity, dogmatic Islamism, dogmatic Buddhism, dogmatic anything that is simply words on paper, is spells and bonds. Time to step away and put away childish things and step into the true Christic tradition of the faith of the master from Nazareth, the message of the Cathars, the message of the Essenes of age. We fell victim to the goddamn Pharisees. We've been brought into the Khazarian mafia, which is an extension of the Pharisees, which is time is money. And we've been indentured and enslaved into bonded enslavement and indentureship from birth because of the registrations and tabulations. We could go on about the science of it. The point is, each one of us in the here and now simply need to move into immanent stillness and restore relationship with our own highest counsel, our consciousness and our conscience. And then right action and pure truth will issue from that. That is the new doctrine of how we see the world through the eyes of a child, and are then led through the grace of God into our highest expression, our highest outcome.
What I love about what you just said, Sacha, is the ascension, the coming together. We are connecting to source. We are connecting to our creator like never before. And that's a wonderful thing to hear. Sacha, tell our audience where they can find all your great work.
I haven't the faintest idea. I think roundabout now there's so many websites. I mean, you're welcome to go to sachastone.com, just spell Sacha correctly. Or those wanting to follow my spiel can go to lazarusinitiative.com. That is the one you want to sign up to, lazarusinitiative.com. That's my closed community. It's the only place I'm doing my own broadcasting to a very enlightened audience. So I would say go to lazarusinitiative.com, sign up there, and I look forward to seeing you inside that community.
You know, you still have a Hollywood entertainment site up that's being populated with content. I know you started that site in 2006. It's some Hollywood site. I'll get you the name of it.
I can't remember that, but there is a Hollywood blogger called Sacha Stone, so don't confuse me with her. She's written to me.
Sacha Stone, thanks so much. Sorry my camera dropped. We'll let you go. Going to have you back again. Love you, brother.
God bless you, Scotty. Bye now.
Bye-bye.